Hey guys, do subscribe our YouTube channel and press the bell button to never miss any update from Radio Udaan.
Hello everyone, I'm Sonal Patel from Cambridge, Massachusetts in USA. I'm continuously inspired by many amazingly talented and bright visually impaired and blind students from India whom I got to mentor through an NGO named Vision Aid based in Boston, Massachusetts in USA. Today, I have with me such a student from Vision Aid, Bhavya Shah from Mumbai, who joined their online Python programming class in the fall of 2017, and I was lucky to get a chance to mentor him in this program. Bhavya is a great debate champion and is very well known at an international level in the world of young debate enthusiasts. He also writes very beautiful blogs and has been involved with many other activities and competitions while in school. And I got to know him when he was in 10th grade. He was part of India's national debate team in 2019. And Bhavya is the first visually impaired speaker to be part of the World School Debate Championship Grand Finals. Team India, of which Bhavya was a part, won the tournament in 2019, and Bhavya individually ranked 6th best speaker in the world. So well done, Bhavya. Bhavya has recently completed his 12th grade in India in the science stream, and he would be joining Stanford University, located near San Francisco in California in USA, which is also called Silicon Valley area in USA. And there he will begin his undergraduate education from fall 2020. Now today, Bhavya will help to demystify the US Undergraduate School Application process through his own experience. And welcome, Bhavya. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very nice, Bhavya. So here is the first curiosity that all the listeners here have for you. My first question: why did you decide to apply for the undergraduate studies in USA?
So this wasn't a very clear decision from the start. It's something that one thing after another led me to focus more on and consider more seriously. So for the past 2 years, though I have done the science stream and I've thoroughly enjoyed my STEM education at the junior college or the 11th and 12th grades in India, I have not received accessible material because of resource constraints in a country like India. I have had to type questions of my textbooks and figure out workarounds that are not always ideal to complete my education, particularly in subjects like the math and the sciences. I think US universities, particularly the one that I have been lucky to get accepted to, have a dedicated students with disabilities department which is devoted to making material accessible and helping out students with special needs in requesting and getting accommodations. So one of the big reasons was the greater sense of inclusion and accessibility that I'm likelier to receive in a US undergraduate education as opposed to one in India. There are other things, of course. I feel like I would thrive better in an English-speaking country. I'm more fluent in expressing my ideas in that language. And I also think uniquely a characteristic of US universities is that they allow for a lot of exploration and flexibility. In India, what you have is that you need to, in most cases, declare your subject from the start. Before the 4 years of your bachelor's degree, you need to tell them and stick to a specific subject of study. And that's something you usually don't get the opportunity to change. I think in my case, I have done a lot of extracurricular activities and tried to dip my feet in a lot of different subject areas. That is something a university like Stanford would better enable me to do. The reason why I say that is because for the first 2 years, I don't even need to tell them which subject I want to specialize in. I can take courses in all the different subject areas and departments that they offer, and that is flexibility I wish to take advantage of. Even after the end of the first 2 years of my undergraduate education, when I declare which subject I will be majoring or specializing or concentrating in, I can still from time to time take courses outside of my comfort zone, outside of my subject of study, so that I can make sure that I'm a well-rounded person who gets to grow in a lot of different levels, a lot of different areas. So all of these reasons culminated in my decision that it would be better for me if I could study in the US or a foreign university, and thus I did apply.
Very good, Bhavya. I will bring up some questions later on this line. Now, let's see, you decided that USA would be a better choice for you, and you decided the process for applying. And when do you think that process started? Right after your 10th grade?
So I do think it's important to have an early start. You need to have some sense of how sure you are that you want to study in a foreign university. There are obviously wonderful educational institutions in India itself, and there is no denying that they also often provide comparable quality of education. So you need to be certain, be clear as to why you might benefit from an education abroad. Once you've done that, it's best to start early, as I said earlier. So in my case, in my 11th grade, I think midway there is when I started appearing for the standardized testing examinations, which you need to do for applications to US universities. And I started getting more serious about which universities I was looking at, and maybe thinking about the admissions process, how my application would look. So I think the timeline to aim for is that immediately after the 10th grade, when you get a couple of months of break, start thinking what your career goals are, what your academic interests are, and whether a US education, not just for the glamour and glorification of foreign countries, but whether it would legitimately benefit you. And if you determine that that is the case, then maybe start preparing and start looking around and doing your research as to what next steps you need to take. Of course, we'll be discussing some of these next steps in this conversation.
Okay, very good, Bhavya. So now, once you decided that you want to apply to USA for undergraduate schooling, so let's start with the standardized admission test. So which standardized admission test you took before you applied, and how did you prepare for these tests? And did you need any special accommodation for taking these tests? So can you share all that experience?
Sure. So there are slight variations among different universities and depending on which institution from India you are applying from, but I will be speaking about the generalized set of rules here, the generalized set of tests and exams that most international students would need to take. So to begin with, you need to compulsorily either appear for the SAT or the ACT. Now, what this test tests you on, roughly both of them, is just your general aptitude in English, language and comprehension and literary analysis, and mathematics. Basically 10th grade level mathematics, which you probably already know, just need to brush up a little bit and do a little bit of practice. So after you have done your SAT or ACT, then come more specific subject level tests. So there are two things here. One, the SAT subject tests, and two, the advanced placement tests. A lot of universities have at least 2 SAT subject tests as a mandatory requirement. Some have 3, some don't require it at all. I strongly recommend taking them and doing as well and achieving near perfect or perfect scores on these. Advanced placement exams are even higher difficulty level tests, and they test you based on college preparatory curriculum. So things that you are likely to learn in your first year of college if you have already taken challenging coursework in your school and in other coaching institutions, then you know that syllabus and you want to show to those universities that you're ready for the rigor of a US undergraduate study inside their university. So subject tests and APs come then. In my case, I prepared for the SAT. I did not appear for the ACT. I did the SAT by practicing on Khan Academy, where College Board, the organization that conducts the ACT, has put up a set of official past year question papers. I think that's ample practice, and that proved sufficient for me to score fairly highly on that test. For the SAT subject test, on which I did the physics, chemistry, and math too, and achieved perfect scores on all of them, I would suggest referring to the Princeton review books. They're available on Bookshare, not entirely accessible, but workable in large part, and going through their content and their practice drills and stuff like that, they really cover the essentials that you need to score well on the test without going too much deeply into the conceptual bits. Of course, there is Barron's as well. You can check that out. Not what I referred to. For the advanced placement exams, I didn't do all that well, so I gave a few of them, but I did not report those scores to the college. So I didn't even tell in my college application that these are some AP exams that I took and I want to tell you about. I did not do that. I appeared for English language and composition, physics, chemistry, and calculus, and I performed to varying degrees on all of these. So ultimately, I think all of these tests help show to the college that you're ready for the academic challenges that they present in a more standardized way. So colleges get a metric on which to compare you with the rest of the applicant pool if you are qualified, if you are capable and likely to be able to thrive in their college environment. There is an additional test called the TOEFL. Sometimes you can also give the IELTS as a replacement for that. I give the TOEFL, which stands for the Test of English as a Foreign Language. And it's extremely simple. You again do a little bit of online practice of past year questions, go through sections, and it's fairly simplistic. You just answer basic English questions to show to the college that despite being an international student, you will be able to communicate effectively in an English speaking US education system. So these are broadly the tests that you need to give, and some are mandatory for some colleges, others are not. I would recommend you to check out the list of universities you are considering. Go Google their standardized testing requirements and figure out which ones you need to be appearing for. In terms of accommodations for them, they do exist. So I use different sets of accommodations on different tests. For the TOEFL exam, I gave it computer-based independently. For the rest, I used a scribe, extended time, and braille graphs, charts, and figures. I didn't really use that material, tactile stuff, because the questions are not very visual, not very diagrammatic, and the little bit that is, it can be explained verbally by the scribe. It has a slightly complicated process of requesting for those accommodations. You need to, particularly here as a student with special needs, make a really good head start. So you need to send them a lot of forms and medical documentation and appealing for these accommodations several months in advance, even before the test date. Then they take 7 weeks approximately for College Board and other periods of time for the TOEFL and other exams to review it and then get back to you as to whether you approved. It usually isn't denied. It wasn't in my case, and the process is fairly smooth, but just that you want to be on your toes and make sure that you meet all the deadlines. Otherwise, that's the process of all the exams that you need to give, prepare for. Accommodations are in place, and you just need to crack them and do well.
Okay, very good. And so all the information about accommodation, etc., you will find on the College Board website, and we will share the link to that site, as well as the Khan Academy and any other resources that Bhavya mentioned above. We will try to share that. And now, before we move away from this topic, let's mention that The standardized tests, those different SAT, scholastic aptitude tests that Bhavya mentioned, are kind of required tests. Standardized general tests as well as the subject tests that Bhavya did, and he scored pretty much full on all these exams. But he mentioned about the AP advanced placement are not a required test. Those are optional exams that normally students in USA applying to good schools, they take these courses in their school and then appear for the advanced placement exams. So now, Bhavya, why don't you mention a little bit about how one can prepare for these AP exams in India, and what are the costs involved in the general standard SAT, TOEFL, as well as AP, and what can be eliminated, if you have any comment about that?
So these exams are a little bit expensive and like several thousands of rupees for each of these tests, and that's unfortunately a trade-off that one needs to bear at the time of getting all of these things in place. The advanced placement exams in particular, they're optional, but registering for them is exorbitantly expensive. So 4 tests costed me about 60,000 Indian rupees, and that's quite high, and you don't get financial aid for them. But here's my take on whether or not, independent of the financial expenditures associated, you should genuinely take these or not. I strongly recommend SAT and SAT subject tests 2 or 3, and additionally TOEFL for sure. And for the AP exams, if you feel like your application is otherwise really strong, you've got other really competitive examination ranks that are prestigious and a stellar academic record that would convince the college that you're ready for the rigor, then I think it's possible and okay to not appear for the APs. However, if you have the money and if you have the will, I absolutely recommend doing so, because it puts you at par and allows colleges to match you with the level of a lot of other international students that apply, and a lot of domestic US students that apply as well, who have got dozens of AP courses and exams on their application.
Yes, Bhavya, yes, that's right, that many US students will have more than a dozen AP exam on their applications. But for those who may not know, there is a lot of material available for preparing AP, and those who cannot take AP exam in India or because of financial reason, there is a online resource called a MOOC platform called edX, which started from Harvard and MIT, and they are providing a number of AP courses accessible to everyone on their platform. And so those of you who still want to learn the material for the AP classes, and of course, if you want to take exam, that's optional, but you can still take these classes on the edX platform and can also earn a certificate, which is not official as that conducted by the AP board, but it will give you the very similar amount of material to learn from. And Bhavya, you are here, you mentioned about academic record. If you have that to show that you have taken variety of college level courses, would you like to elaborate on what type of college level courses that you had where you did not need an additional proof from the AP exam scores?
I was part of the CBSE till the 10th grade, and then I switched to the state board in Maharashtra for 11th and 12th grades. I had got quite high percentages across all 4 years, good class ranks, and I think those were fairly convincing. In addition, I had got a couple of international math and science Olympiad and competitive examination ranks. Also, since Stanford is a fairly tech oriented college due to its proximity to Silicon Valley, particularly, I also included a couple of IT challenges in China and another quiz competition nationally by the Tatas in India, and another prestigious national Wiz Juniors tech learning competition. So all of these included in my honors and awards and other extracurricular sections, I was of the opinion that they would substitute the need for the AP exams, and I think I made the right call.
Very good, Bhavya. That's useful. And if anything appropriate you want to share later in the description, we will try to share those links. Bhavya will also share his LinkedIn profile, and probably all this information will be there about his credential and awards, etc., on his LinkedIn profile. And let me add one thing here. Is that those of you who may be considering taking more advanced classes, not just AP exam, but now there are a lot of advanced classes available on various MOOC platforms like edX and Coursera and of course even Khan Academy also has some variety of classes. So you can actually continue learning online on these MOOC platform, and that will also enhance your learning, as well as even if you want to take any advanced exams, that will also help. So let's move on to the next question. So now that all this about the preparation, exams, etc., so how did you select which university to apply to, and what was your selection criteria?
The general advice I would give here is that don't only apply to the top universities. I was lucky to get into Stanford under the restricted early action program itself, but I think it's generally a good rule, particularly given the slightly arbitrary and subjective nature of the holistic admissions process in the US, to not rely on being very certain about getting into your first or second choice schools. What I mean by this is to have a blend. In my case, had I not got into Stanford, I would have applied to a bunch of places like maybe Amherst or Middlebury or Columbia, and potentially even lesser ranked universities like a few liberal arts colleges. So have a blend of schools that are really hard to get into, but which you really have on the top of your list. Also schools that are ranked somewhere in the middle, in the top 50s or top 100s across the country, and some safety schools in which you are almost certain to get in, to make sure that you aren't left without an option at the end, because this is a challenging cycle. Also, I think it's important to use a bunch of metrics on which to pick the schools you want to select. In my case, of course, disability services was a big thing. Though what I did is that I applied to all the schools that I liked academically, and I was going to filter out which I would like to pick out of all of those based on who accepted me. Another factor is you can use rankings by US News and World Report and Niche and US World Universities. Rankings are a crude proxy towards the quality of education by subject overall for those universities, but I think it's a fairly reliable measure that is the best option you have. Another thing is the culture of the school, in that whether it is humanities oriented, like maybe a Harvard, or if it is extremely STEM oriented, like maybe an MIT, or maybe if it's a little bit more STEM oriented, but there is a lot of liberal arts and humanities still, like a Stanford. So those are factors you can consider. Then, of course, whether their internship placements, they have research opportunities, how the job prospects of undergraduate and graduate students from those universities, what that record. A lot of this data is available on the internet, and you can use that to choose which universities you like more or less. Another thing for me was I needed to apply to only those US universities which offered financial aid to international students. This absolutely eliminated all the public universities in the US, like the University of California system, because those are federally funded by the US government, so they give scholarships only to applicants who are domestic, who are from the United States of America itself. Therefore, there are colleges, a lot of them, who are need blind or need aware, so they give financial aid to international students, and that was another filter that I used. So all of these things come down, and you do a lot of research, you see what you like, you speak to alumnus and current students of these different universities, you get in touch and keep doing research and see which school's academics as well as culture appeals and suits your personality and suits your goals the best.
Very good. Anyway, so there is a lot to think, and there is a school you will have to do your own research, and it will still differ from person to person but you will have to do research about it. So now is a very important question about what was involved in the application process. Once he selected the schools, the application process is not just your academic records, and the scholastic test, but so now what I want to know, Bhavya, so you can go as deep as possible in demystifying the entire application process beyond the standardized test. So go ahead, Bhavya.
Again, this varies for different universities. For instance, MIT and the University of California system, and I'm sure several other US universities, have entirely different college applications. So you need to go on their website, create an account, sign up on the applicant portal, fill off their questions, forms, information, essays. However, a lot of universities have come together on a common college application platform. There are several of these. There is one called Common App, another called Coalition App, another called, I believe, Universal College App. And you can research more to find out the distinct features of all of these. Common App is what I used because all of the universities I was interested in were part of the Common App system. So once you are on Common App, just create an account and fill in a lot of personal information, name, parent information, educational information, your grades, and a lot of stuff like that. Now, apart from just these forms and these personal details and your grades, there comes the sections of what honors and awards and certificates have you got in the past. List 5 of the most impressive of them. What extracurricular activities have you been involved in across your 4 years of high school from grades 9 to grades 12? Then answer a bunch of questions. These aren't questions to test your knowledge, but these are essays to reveal you not as a student, but more so as a person, as a human being, as somebody behind that application. So these essays could be like, tell us something about your background, or what letter would you want to write to a roommate, or what extracurricular activity has been most meaningful to you, or again, these questions vary from college to college. Some of these are 650-word essays, some of these are 50-word essays, some of these are 1-word prompts, a sentence-long prompt. So these things come. You need to spend a lot of time writing these essays, getting feedback from other people, and just making sure that your entire personality and individuality is reflected on that college application. Because no matter how impressive a student you might be in grades, if that college admissions officer doesn't genuinely develop a liking to you for maybe the challenges you've overcome, or for the humanitarian things you've done, or for your thoughtfulness, then that application has a missing element. You want to make sure that yours doesn't. Apart from these essays, there is an additional information section which you get to list extra stuff that you were missed elsewhere. Then there are also letters of recommendation for which you reach out to a school counselor, an English teacher, a math teacher, and any additional person who knows you quite well and would be able to write a recommendation for you. So those people provide third-party perspectives independently to these colleges about you as a student, about how they know you and what traits about you they like or would like to highlight. So you want to approach those teachers whom you think know you well and view you in a positive light. So these are broadly all of the things that come in. There are nuances here and there that you figure out, you might be confused by, but again, the key is to either ask Common App directly, they have a 24-hour support line, or to ask other people who have been through this process specific questions, such as myself. So all of these things come together, and whilst it might seem like just a bunch of forms and essays and letters to compile, to really make sure that when an admissions officer reads the entirety of your application, a very vivid picture of you as a promising candidate comes out, requires a lot of reading, rereading, editing, zooming out, taking a broad look, and then rewriting stuff again. But this is the process that is utterly worthwhile at the end. So when you get your college acceptance, all of this effort feels like it paid off.
Okay, so the process is not just academics. The entire application process is a lot of qualitative. You have to be a good writer, and you should be able to express yourself very well too. And now, Bhavya, one thing here. So in this application process, is there any cost involved?
Yes, there are application fees that you may need to pay. In my case, I just indicated on all of my college applications that, hey, I will need waivers for the application fee, and my school counselor is asked to write a supporting letter to say that paying for these fees, applications for colleges would constitute a financial hardship. So I paid ₹0 for all of my college applications combined. Sending the financial aid request form, for which again you need to have a lot of documentation and details and tax returns and this and that. For that, ironically, I needed to pay quite a bit of money. But apart from that, it isn't all that expensive.
Okay, so that's the application process. You would still pay the cost for the standardized tests that you do have to take. And so now, this you gave a very detailed information. So let me ask you something that many parents and listeners here who may also be wondering, that during the process of applying to US university, you receive help from friends, family, teachers when you are preparing your application, and can you share what type of support you received when you were going through the entire application process, and just anything you want to share?
Sure. So the first thing I did is, because I don't have any direct friends or acquaintances from my school who were also applying to these top universities, so I was kind of a step behind the average international student in that respect. I tried to make up for that by doing a lot of internet research. This ranges from sites like Prep Scholar, like College Confidential, like College Advisor, College Essay Guy. You just scour the corners of the internet to get all of the insights that you need to be at the same level, to be equipped with the same information about what strategies you want to employ, how best to represent your originality in that college application. So internet research, and extensive internet research at that, is a key. It is the precursor to a good college application. After I wrote all of my essays, there were a lot of them. Essays are really important to communicate who you are as a person. I sent all of these essays to a lot of friends that I had. I am really lucky to, from my debating circle and from other friends that I've made over the years, have a support network of people who have themselves undergone this admissions process and college application stuff, and who were very willing to take a look at my essays, offer feedback, criticisms, blunt opinions. For perspective, the first draft of my main essay, when I sent that to one person from Stanford and another person from the University of Pennsylvania, both of them came back saying, hey, this doesn't convey anything about you and you need to start from scratch all over again. And that's how I discarded that altogether. So eventually you work on those essays, You write, you rewrite, you must be willing to abandon ideas if everybody else says that it doesn't reflect you properly. But ultimately, there will be oftentimes when you get differing opinions from different people. Grammar, spelling, ideas, flow of content, the theme of different essays ultimately needs to be you who makes decisions, you who incorporates all the different feedback, who evaluates them, and is responsible for incorporating the vast majority of it. So feedback and taking support from other people is crucial in the process, but you must rely on your own intellect and your own autonomy at the end of the day.
Very good, Bhavya. In fact, the resource that you are providing now, I think will help many future applicants, and hope that is useful to everyone. And Bhavya may also help out his close friends.
I will give a fun fact here. One of the person who took a look at my essays and offered a lot of really valuable and useful feedback was Sonal ma'am's son himself.
Very good. So my son is at Stanford University, but even he was very impressed by Bhavya's writing. And he also said, Bhavya, don't worry even if you don't get into Stanford. But it was really, Bhavya has worked really, really hard. But before I ask you my next question, one very important question that you did not bring up in your academics when you apply for your test and things like that was that you were also studying for JEE. And do you recommend studying for JEE if one wants to apply abroad?
I'm not entirely sure, because I think it definitely advantaged me in that I prepared barely at all for the standardized tests here, the subject tests, and I was able to do fairly well on all of them. And the vast majority of what I wrote in those papers was based on drawing from my knowledge, the knowledge that I gained in my JEE coaching, my JEE preparation journey. It's a real opportunity cost though, because doing serious JEE prep and actually making the IITs as a real option requires a lot of time and effort to be inputted. Is this to say that you cannot do both? Absolutely not. In fact, I think I did quite well on my JEE mains and qualified to the JEE advanced, which I might or might not give. But now that I've got Stanford and I've got a really nice US university that I look forward to attending, I'm not entirely sure I see the utility of the JEE coaching journey. Again, it's a lot of learning. You get to explore these subjects in greater depth than you ever would, physics, chemistry, and mathematics for the joint entrance examination. But ultimately, it's a choice you need to make. Are you capable of doing both, or would you like to focus on just one? That's a decision that requires greater forethought and tailoring to your individual circumstances and capacities.
Yes, one little note I would add to this is those who are STEM oriented, there are amazing accessible classes even on MIT OCW website, and you should check those out. Probably if you are really thinking of applying abroad and not thinking of going to IIT. Okay, so but this is still your choice. Okay, now Bhavya, a very important question. Now that you have been admitted to Stanford University and you have decided to join, so because that was your top choice, and can you share if you have received any financial support from the university and how are you planning to support your education at Stanford University?
Sure. So without financial aid, US education is incredibly expensive. So assuming I were to receive zero scholarship from Stanford, my 4-year education would cost about 2.5 crore Indian rupees, money which I have absolutely not. However, all of these universities are really generous in their aid programs. So Stanford has given me 80% aid at this moment. There is the opportunity to negotiate this and hopefully increase the amount further, which is something I will do. But ultimately, I think it nets out to an amount that is comparable to that which you would pay to an Indian elite technical institution. So yes, you can sponsor it, but just that you need to make sure to apply to their financial aid programs and focus on those universities which offer that to international students in the first place.
Yeah, at this point, let me bring up the other topic. When you selected the university, I believe that you also had that criteria in mind, that some of the university, not all universities in USA, offer the need blind admission and then match your need. So were you selective about that in applying, that this is possible not in most public universities in USA, but many private universities and all the Ivy school, they do have that need blind admissions. And if you can share something about it, as well as your experience visiting one or two universities when you visited USA in 2018, and what did you learn around that time?
Sure. As I indicated earlier, I had to remove all the public universities in the US from my list because they don't themselves offer financial aid packages to international students, and if they do, they provide really insufficient amounts. So I focused on those universities which were need aware and need blind. I want to explain this distinction here. Need blind universities are those which just look at you as an applicant, and if they like you, then they accept you no matter your financial need, and then they look at your financial aid request and give you however much money they need to give you to enable you to attend. On the other hand, need aware universities, they account for the amount of financial need you demonstrate as a factor that disadvantages you in the application process. This is to say that all else equal in terms of meritoriousness, a university which practices the need-aware policy for financial aid for international students would pick that student which requires lesser financial aid as opposed to that who requires more. Now, this shouldn't discourage you entirely from applying to need-aware universities. Stanford, for instance, is a need-aware university for international students. Need-blind universities include MIT, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Amherst, and that's about it in the US. There are a lot of need-aware universities, Stanford being one of them, the rest of the Ivy Leagues, and many other prestigious schools. Blind has nothing to do with blind as in visual impairment when I say need blind, but this is a distinction that's worth knowing. I was lucky to visit MIT and Harvard with Sonal ma'am. Again, fun fact, in 2018, I had come to Cornell University for a summer program regarding debating, and then I traveled from New York to Massachusetts. I stayed with a week with Sonal ma'am, and she took me to MIT and Harvard and check out their campuses, admission tours, and really get a sneak peek in real life myself. So that also helps give you perspective, but I want to be clear, you don't need to travel 2 years before the application process like I got the chance to in order to check these university campuses out if you cannot afford the same. It's a useful experience, but not absolutely necessary.
Thank you very much, Bhavya. But now that you brought up this, you visited USA, but why did you visit? We didn't bring up a separate topic as an extracurricular activity, but if you can share briefly, about your extracurricular activity during your 11th and 12th grade, that you attended some camps or visited USA for some activity, especially debate related or non-STEM related, just share very quickly. I think that will give listener a perspective about you as a whole, as a person.
Sure. In the 11th grade, I was lucky to get scholarships to attend 2 programs in the US. One was the Cornell University International Summer Debate Camp, and another was a space camp at the US Space and Rocket Center in Alabama. The former one was for all students, non-disabled ones. The latter was only for visually impaired students. And the former was about debating, the art of argumentation, training for that, doing a tournament. The latter was about astronomy, science, learning and doing simulations of missions and rocket construction, and just generally getting an opportunity to network with other like-minded visually impaired students from across the world. So these also provided me exposure to know that I was able to take care of myself, manage and thrive alone in the US without my parents accompanying me, without there being anybody I knew beforehand. So that gave me, and more importantly my family, the confidence that I would be able to survive and survive well alone in a foreign country if the support system was good and if the quality of education was good. Other things that I did in my 12th grade, as Sonal ma'am said in my introduction, I was lucky to be selected as part of the Indian National School Debate Team. We did our season of debating in 2019 from January to July. We participated in a bunch of preparatory warm-up debate competitions, of course, which culminated in the World Schools Debating Championship in Thailand, which we won and in which I got a quite good individual speaker ranking, and which was totally a rewarding experience as well.
Very good, Bhavya. I think all this will be very useful to all the listeners who are considering to apply abroad. So let's say at the end, I know after this, many people, many friends will ask you a lot of questions. Now, anything you can recall or you want to give advice to your friends, so anything more that you haven't said so far, especially giving advice to anyone who is blind or visually impaired and who is considering applying to US University for undergraduate studies. So please share anything that we may not have covered, but you think it's important. And please share anything, some final words.
There are two things I want to say. One, on not making it to your top choice, and two, on being open to new opportunities and diversifying your interests. So on the first thing, there would be entirely possible that I would not have gotten into Stanford University. They literally have a 4 to 5% acceptance rate. So the overwhelming majority of applications are returned with a rejection letter. I was lucky to be one of the few to be part of the accepted, admitted application pool. Now, it was entirely possible that Stanford would not have accepted me, nor would have most of the other US universities. The key here is to apply to blend so that you have a couple of backup options, a couple of safety schools. If nothing in the US would have worked out for me, I had prepared for the JEE and I would be able to get into a decent technical institution inside our country as well. I want to point out that whilst I started off my reasoning and rationale for applying to the US with superior disability services, things in India are really changing. The landscape is improving for blind and visually impaired students, not only in other subject areas that are non-visual, but also those which are STEM oriented. So IIT Kharagpur has an inclusion cell, and things are promising and things are entirely doable inside India as well. So don't be resentful if US doesn't work out. There are amazing opportunities inside our own country also. On the second thing about diversifying your interests, I want to stress that the US admissions process is just partially looking at your marks and your grades. But it's a really significant and important factor, it is not the be-all and end-all. I strongly encourage all students across the high school to just take part in different competitions and extracurricular activities. In my case, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I sort of liked technology when I was kind of young, but then I did quiz competitions. I did Model United Nations conferences. I participated in science fairs. years. I participated in these summer programs that I randomly applied to because I wanted to see what else the world had to offer for people my age to satisfy my curiosity. You want to make sure to keep exploring different avenues and keep knocking different doors. Some opportunities will come your way, and you want to try to make the most of it. You will realize only if you experiment and dabble around in different things what you like, what you're good at, and that's something that's a gradual process. I still haven't figured out with certainty what I want to do at university, but what I am sure of is that I will make the most of all the opportunities that come my way, as I've done in the past, and that every student should do, and I will continue to do that at university.
Very good, Bhavya. I think you have provided a lot of information that people, the listener, will have to digest and take the decision. It will help them to decide, whether they want to apply and where they want to apply, and whether they want to study in India or abroad, and many other things. In fact, Stanford, Harvard, and many such schools, these are schools called the School of Liberal Arts. That will give you opportunity to explore variety of subjects, whereas the schools like MIT, Caltech are more technology oriented schools. So these are big differences, and I think Bhavya had different types of schools on his list, but he preferred the School of Liberal Arts, which will satisfy all his extracurricular activity, as well as even Stanford University is also extremely good in its STEM education and technology, including computer science and variety of other subjects, as well as these are all research universities, and they are heavily involved in research, and the students from undergraduate level start getting involved in research. But all these things, when you do research about these universities, you will find out. And please remember, for everyone, there is online courses. There are variety of online courses and online resources. And right now, while we are recording this interview, almost the universities around the world are offering a lot of courses to their own on-campus students because of the virus. Let's end the interview here. So let's thank Bhavya.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Bhavya, for helping to demystify the application process for undergraduate schools in USA, and wish you very best for your new beginning at Stanford University from fall 2020, and I look forward to meeting you there.